Hi, welcome back. This topic focuses on the hoodwink, which has been recommended by a number of people, actually. I think because its meaning um, seems to be somewhat obvious to the average person, but when looking deeper into it, it has a myriad of different meanings, and I think it would be interesting to go into. Hoodwink has two meanings. Etymologically, or even definition wise, I should say, hoodwink means to trick or deceive. It also means a blindfold of sorts, as in a hood to go over the eyes. Now, most craft Freemasons would look at the hoodwink in the sense of it being used as a blindfold, just something to put over the eyes. But I think if we look at its other meaning and its somewhat older meaning, to trick or deceive, there's a lot that can come from that, a lot of wealth that can be drawn from that meaning. So we must ask the question, why, what relevance would the meaning trick or deceive have in relation to hoodwink in the context of the initiate going through his first degree ceremony? Well, let's look at the candidate in the first degree. So the candidate is about to embark upon his ceremony of initiation. He's not meant to know what's about to happen. He doesn't know shouldn't know what was going to happen in the ceremony. He shouldn't really know what the lodge room looks like internally. Shouldn't know anything really. It should be a very new, original experience for him. So on a very sort of base level, having the hoodwink covering the eyes so that he doesn't see anything means that he's walking into an environment with a sense of somewhat trepidation. He doesn't know what he's about to encounter, and therefore he has to put a lot of trust in his fellow invitees. Is that the right word? Inviters. The ones who have invited him, essentially, and especially the junior deacon. And interestingly, the junior deacon offers his left arm to support the candidate's right arm in the first degree ceremony. Now, to many or the majority of esoterically minded seekers, the notion of left and right has particular connotations. So, left is heart based, right is mind based. So whenever you would, I think normally when you would see a reference to left, I would normally go directly to the notion of heart. And if I see right, then it's about the intellect, the mind. When I say the mind, I mean more the lower thinking mind, but more the intellect. So from the off, the candidate is offering his intellect for something else to be replaced by it. Is substituting the mind for the heart. Now, interestingly, the notion of hoodwink being to trick or deceive has a lot of relevance in this context because the mind plays tricks on us. Most of us believe the truth of what the mind is telling us. Most of us believe the truth of the thoughts that come in. Most of us believe a feeling that arises. Well, one can believe the truth of it or not. It doesn't really affect the truth of it. A belief in some truth doesn't mean it's true. Just because the mind has generated a thought doesn't mean that thought holds truth. Now, what we can know for a fact is one knows one has a thought, one is aware of a thought, one is aware of a feeling. That's as much as you can say. Whether that very thought or feeling has truth to it is something entirely different. And the majority of us, the majority of mankind, is trapped in that thought or feeling. So they are completely blinded by it and they can't see anything but that. Take the notion of anger. Everyone would understand this surely, because everyone normally has experienced anger at some point in their lives, at some moment. When anger is experienced, one sees red. I know that's an expression, but it has real connotations. Red is a color of the root chakra, the emotional, the earth sense. Now, when you have anger, you would say, I am angry, like as if I am and anger was synonymous. You would be in anger. You can't see anything else but anger. If you just shift your perspective to the heart, then you're moving deeper in your own reality. So once you do that, you're no longer in anger. You can see it, you can observe it, but you won't be in it anymore. If you're operating from the heart, it's a deeper perspective, which is the reason why, in my view, in order to go beyond the material aspect of reality to something that is deeper, one must sacrifice the intellect for use of the heart in that context. So, in a very real sense, you could say that we are hoodwinked by the mind, and all of the material aspects of reality. So we believe the truth of the material, of the phenomenal reality. So because we believe the truth of it, it's such a veil that is put over our eyes that it's very difficult to see beyond it. Imagine standing in the daytime sun. You're completely overcome by the sunshine. So you won't be able to see the stars beyond the sky that is illumined or blue. So only once the sun moves down and goes below the horizon, that you can see another reality, just like this. So the notion of the sun moving down, you could liken to the junior warden's pedestal and the column. Above the junior warden's pedestal is a terrestrial globe, symbolizing the earthly reality. You can also liken it to the sun because of the three lesser lights. So you've got the junior warden representing an earthly material aspect with the sun above, and you've got the senior warden representing the celestial globe. It has the celestial globe above the pillar of the column, and that also has been designated the moon in the triad of the lesser lights. So you've got the sun and you've got the moon. So the junior warden is represented by the sun. You've got the senior wardens represented by the moon. Also, the junior warden you could liken to the intellect, whereas the senior warden can liken to the heart. And that has, again, as I was saying before, real symbolic relevance. If the intellect is likened to the sun, you could say that the intellect, which is sitting in the southern sphere, junior wardens in the southern sphere, that is the place of greatest light. And it is enlightening to receive information, to understand. Knowledge is enlightening, but it's blinding. And so you must lower your junior warden's column, you must lower the sun in order to see a reality deeper. I'm not suggesting intellect is a bad thing. It's just the first stage of everyone's journey. One must suspend the, I wouldn't say activity of the mind, because that's not the best way of looking at it. It's more about discarding one's, or I should say, moving one's focus away from the mind to that of something deeper, such as the heart. So instead of trying to subdue the mind, which is a fool's errand in my view, it's more about shifting focus away from the mind to that which is deeper than the mind, that which can view the mind without engaging with it. So just like, for instance, the sun, which is overbearing, has an influence on the moon, which reflects its light, the moon is not totally and utterly in the sun's light. It has a dark side to it. Now, dark not being a negative force, it just being something which is more free, less imprisoned, less trapped by the material. So in one sense, you could say that the moon flits between both realities, between the earthly and between the celestial, because it has one side which is fully immersed in the sun, and the other side which is the dark side of the moon, which one can't see, but you know that it's there. Just like within you, you know that there is a physical sense of self, the physical person. I mean, I could say Ben is here in the real world, outside, I say the real world, in the material world, has a personality, a body. But there is a reality that's deeper, which is not easy to see at first in the beginning of one's journey, just like the hoodwink. So that's one way of looking at the hoodwink. In other words, it's placed over the eyes for the candidate in the first degree ceremony to block away that which has tricked him up to that point. Now, the reason why he can't see anything when he walks into the lodge is also highly relevant. It's symbolic. Remember, the lodge room is fully lit when the candidate walks in, even though he's in a state of darkness. And when he's not in darkness, it's a state of darkness. It's a state of confusion, a state of ignorance, aimlessly groping around in the dark, looking for oneself. That's where one's at the beginning of the journey. So this hoodwink, you could use the argument, you could say the hoodwink is placed over the eyes to remove the material from one's sight in order for one to use feelings to sense what is there beyond the intellect, beyond the material. So that's one way of looking at it. There is another way of looking at it, which is very interesting indeed. Before I go into that, I'm just going to actually just share my screen. I'm going to show where the hoodwink features in the first degree lecture. This is the second section of the first degree lecture. There's a question: why were you hoodwinked? Answer: that in case I had refused to go through any of the usual ceremonies required in making a Mason, I might have been led out of the lodge without discovering its form. Very literal, very surface level. A second reason: as I was received into Masonry in a state of darkness, it was to remind me to keep all the world so with respect to our Masonic mysteries, unless they came legally by them, as I was then about to do. So slightly less literal, but still in a realm of literalism. It's not really that deep in relation to that. It's mentioned the state of darkness. It mentions Masonic mysteries. It mentions coming legally by them. You could look into that in a deeper way, I suppose. Reminding one to keep all the world so has relevance. So as I was received into Masonry in a state of darkness, it was to remind me to keep all the world so. You are to keep all the world in a state of darkness. Well, what does that mean? I suppose you can question that one. So all of these phrases have certain levels of inquiry. I'm not suggesting that one shouldn't look at the first answer or even the second answer, but it's the third one which has relevance to what we've just talked about. Very great relevance. A third reason, so normally you're looking at three different stages of inquiry. This third stage, a third reason, that my heart might conceive before my eyes should discover. Just as we were talking, feeling before thinking. Just like when the candidate first enters the lodge in the first degree, a poignard is presented to his naked left breast, and he's asked, "Do you feel anything?" And he says, "Yes." And that's meant to represent prick of conscience. Now, it's all there. It presses against his heart. So the symbolism is there in respect of using one's heart before the eyes. So I've that's the lecture, but there's something else which I think is important to just explain, because one thing that really stuck out for me was the notion that when the candidate enters the center of the lodge room in the first degree ceremony, when he's at the altar and is asked, "What's the predominant wish of your heart?" his answer is light, to which the junior deacon, by the worshipful master's command, is pleased to restore the candidate. Now, after that, the master says, "Having been restored to the blessing of material light." So we stop there. There's a massive, massive clue as to what an even deeper meaning might be getting at here. Once the hoodwink is removed, in the center of that lodge room, the candidate is restored to material light. Now, let's just think about this. What that means is the candidate has had a glimpse of something deeper while he was shielded from the material light aspect of his reality. But at the point when he's in the center of the lodge, which most seekers for the Masonic truth would naturally assume that he reaches a certain level of enlightenment or certain level of spiritual advancement once he has the hoodwink removed at the center of the lodge. And I must admit, there is some credence to that notion, but let's look at it here in another context. If he's restored to material light, that means it's a retrograde step. This is the Masonic trick. This is the hoodwink. This is the hoodwink that most Masons are blinded by, in my view. The hoodwink is, most people miss the fact that the candidate is restored to material light in the first degree. From there on, he believes he's no longer hoodwinked and walks around in every ceremony without a physical hoodwink over the eyes. But how arrogant. This is what the mind does. And this is what happens when you embark upon some spiritual journey. The deeper and further you go, in fact, the further away from your original naive, pure position you actually were in. What the candidate doesn't realize is, at the beginning of his journey, he was never more closer to the divine perspective than he will be right at the end of his journey when he's going to lose it all. This is the hoodwink, in my view. This is the trick. And you can see that portrayed by how the lodge rooms are presented. In the first degree, candidate walks in to the lodge room in the state of darkness, but the lodge is fully lit, but he doesn't know it. In the second degree, he believes he's no longer hoodwinked and walks into a lodge room which is fully lit, but he's blinded by the light, doesn't see that either. In the second degree, he traverses the north-south boundary. He ends up in the southeast corner. Now, the south is a place of greatest light. If you're moving from the north to the south, you're moving from a place of greatest darkness to a place of greatest light. And when that happens, there's an overexposure of light and you're blinded. In the third degree, he's never more in a darkened state than when he enters into the third degree, because he's no longer got this physical hoodwink on, thinking he's no longer hoodwinked. But the whole lodge room is now. in darkness, save for a glimmer of a light in the east. Well, I appreciate there's another way of looking at this, which I'm happy to talk about on another occasion. But in the sense of the candidate's personal journey and being confused and in a state of darkness, he's never more in darkness than in the third degree. Because with hubris and arrogance and his developing this intellect, this intellectual aspect of himself that he's done in the second degree, when he enters into the third degree, that's his major hoodwink, and this is the Masonic hoodwink in my view. So the lack of any physical hoodwink in the third degree, and coupled with a notion that one is no longer hoodwinked, is the very hoodwink itself, rather than something that is placed over the eyes to symbolize that. So, in my view, there's a lot of depth and there's a lot of layers to the hoodwink symbolism. And I could go on all day with a presentation, but I'm not about to do so with what's meant to be a relatively short video. But I hope you've enjoyed watching this. If you have done, please remember to like the video. If you haven't subscribed already and you want to hear more videos, please do click the subscribe button and ding the bell for more options. Thanks very much for listening. See you soon.